So I thought I would make a different kind of video today. I had a thought, and I think a lot of people have this thought as you're browsing through YouTube and Instagram and forums, and you probably think this as well. And it's, why are there so many great guitarists who are relatively unknown? Or why are there so many great bedroom guitarists not in famous bands or with huge followings? And I look around and there's a lot of talent out there. There's a lot of guys that can shred and play really well and maybe even write really well. And I struggle with this myself. I'm a fairly competent guitar player. I've played in bands. I've done different things. I've learned different styles of music and worked a lot on my own playing and sound. And I think it comes down to a couple of factors. There's a lot of great guys out there, and I think it comes down to a handful of things. And so I'll try and highlight a few of them. The first one, a lot of people go unknown because they aren't pursuing music correctly. Now, when I say that correctly, that's totally subjective. So what I mean is, if all you really do is play guitar by yourself or to backing tracks or, just doing your own thing, it's hard to get your name out there. I mean, if that's all you do is play at home, you're not playing out live, you're not pushing your original content, you're not, garnering a following, and a lot of people really try to accomplish those things. And I think where a lot of people miss it is that a skill or talent on its own is not necessarily the same thing as branding or marketing yourself. This has been kind of my downfall. I put out YouTube videos. I have been making YouTube videos since 2010 or even a little before that. The problem that I did is I just didn't have the right focus on what exactly to work on. My favorite videos to watch are reviews, demos, and just kind of general purpose videos. And to the wider scope of musical audience, these things are not necessarily as interesting. So, to give a better example, people love things like Jared Dines' videos, which I remember following him early on in his career, and he was making these 10 styles of music type videos and remixing different things. And to a non-metal listener or to even a casual music fan, I think these have a lot more appeal. My content is very niche. It's very geared to a specific kind of person. So I tailor my content to go to the hardcore music nerd. That's somebody like me. You're researching a piece of gear, a piece of software, a concept. I tailor my approach to that because that's what I like. I like watching videos that are how to get a certain sound. Is this piece of gear good or not? How do I get this type of sound? Because that's more interesting to me. To a much wider audience, that doesn't necessarily have the same appeal. And when I put out original songs, it's typically instrumental, guitar heavy, and it's none of it's bad, but just to a wide audience, this doesn't have the same appeal. I also would say, number two, the reason a lot of people never get discovered, as it were, is because that's not really their priority. I know plenty of great players and musicians that, maybe in their youth toured in local bands, they worked really hard practicing and getting their skill level up, but then things like career, family, other outside circumstances, owning a house, touring in a band in the early days is very difficult if you want to sustain some of these things at the level most people expect. Pulling upper mid-level income in while you're touring in a band is virtually impossible in the early days. And a lot of people already have, life circumstances that dictate kind of what they're able to do. So it's a lot of small time in the studio stuff, working on music when you have a chance. As you get older, as you progress in life, you kind of accumulate responsibilities, and it's a little harder to, I'm going to quit my job for 6 months, 9 months at a time and tour around in a bus, not making any money, especially in the early days. It's like, making a car payment, making a mortgage, on what you make touring in a small time band is it's pretty rough. So, and in my own life that was the case. I accumulated bills and debt to the point where I had to work a full-time job, usually a full-time job and a part-time job, just to sustain keeping up with the bills. So that being said, that's another reason why people kind of go unnoticed. They don't have time to really market themselves or work hard on the music that they're producing, etc. And I think number 3, and this one is pretty interesting and relevant, I think, is that a lot of people spend so much time refining their sound to be commercial that by the time they've caught up their ability to what's popular, so let's say I'm putting together a band and I want to sound like my favorite band that's out right now, by the time me and all the players get caught up to the point where we're able to emulate that sound, like say you're emulating Periphery a few years ago. So you and all your friends are going to emulate Periphery because that's the sound you like. That's your favorite band. That's what you all listen to. And that's your goal. You're going to emulate this band, right? So what ends up happening is that by the time you've caught your ability level up and everyone else has written songs kind of in that vein, the wave of popularity of that kind of music is waning because a bunch of other people were doing the same thing. This can be said of the metalcore scene. So I remember going to a lot of local shows, and the metalcore sound, the for lack of a better term, emo screamo sound was already kind of played out by the time all these kids in high school and early 20s got their abilities caught up to get the music to where it should be. That music was just, the interest had kind of waned and it really wasn't as relevant anymore, which is unfortunate. And another reason too is that a lot of people that are great guitarists, they don't want necessarily a ton of attention and spotlight. A great example of this is my great uncle. He was a very accomplished pianist and classical guitar player, but he never played for anyone but himself. And I think that's perfectly legitimate. I think there's a lot to be said for cultivating music for yourself. Music is a very individual expression of art and creativity. I don't think it has to be defined by any specific set of expectations. It's like, yes, I'm sure he would have loved to play to a packed concert hall. I'm sure, in the case of the local rock band, they would love to be playing in stadiums, but that's not always the goal. I mean, a lot of people like just having a manageable level of success. And so when you see a lot of these guys on forums that are tone hounds that, have gotten the golden signal chain, the perfect guitars, the perfect gear, and yet that's all they do. They hang out on forums, they make guitars, or guitar videos, they make reviews, and that's fine. I think that's a great use of time for everyone involved. And I think from the outside, and even to friends and family, it might seem confusing. It's like, well, you invest so much time and money into this thing, why aren't you making more money on it? Why aren't you, more successful? These kinds of things. And for a long time, I personally was ashamed of the fact that I had worked to the point where I had a certain skill level and wasn't actively pursuing any musical pursuits. Early in my first career at a large company, I kept the fact of my YouTube channel and a lot of my musical interest kind of hidden because I was so ashamed that people might would be disappointed in me that I wasn't using it more. Like, why are you working this manufacturing job when you should be out touring and playing big shows and these kinds of things? And really, the onus was on me to kind of have moved past that initial stages of awkwardness and kind of branded, developed, gotten into a band that was successful and these kind of things. And I think that's a fair point. I mean, in my youth, in a lot of people's youth, they may have joined bands, they may have even toured or played a lot of local shows, and they got burned out. I mean, multiple practice nights a week, all the gear that's involved, all the personality struggle and conflict that's involved, the emotional draining that is involved in keeping a band together. I think a perfect example of this, I'm wearing a Rest Repose shirt. I love Rest Repose's music. I loved when Jared Dines was participating in it, and Fluff and these different guys, very talented guys, were involved. I was like, this music is great. The problem is, and the reason they've had difficulty sustaining a consistent lineup, is that you have a group of adults that have a lot of responsibilities, and as Jared kind of stated, like, I have no interest in really touring because I can't maintain my YouTube channel. And I think that's a really fair point. I mean, you got to prioritize your personal needs above the needs of a particular project. And I know that for a lot of people, you know, in my early days, I invested a lot of time and energy into a project where there weren't people as motivated. So the difficulty in putting together a group and sustaining it is you have to get 3 to 6, 7 people all coordinated, all on the same schedule, work out the difficulties with transportation, keep everybody's gear working, get everybody to communicate effectively and get along. Getting along is probably the hardest part of being in a band. Playing an instrument well with someone who is motivated and practices is not particularly difficult. The hardest part of getting a band together is actually the logistics and the personnel differences. Being in a band is a lot more than your ability to play. I think this has been echoed by many professionals. I really appreciate the Netflix Hired Gun piece, and there's a bunch in there about, okay, you take all the guys that have all the ability in the world, right? So they have, you know, the talent, they have the chops, they have the style, they even have the look, right? But then you talk about who are the guys that can do what I need them to do, so my particular interest, and then they kind of, you basically start chopping away, and it gets down to where there's basically like 3 people who could realistically be in this. Then in this case it was Rob Zombie's band. He's like, well, there's realistically like 3 to 7 people, and I know who they all are that could really do what I want them to do, right? So that's the thing, is there's probably, you know, thousands, tens of thousands of guitarists worldwide that at a playing ability could be up on stage with a mainstream group. I mean, most music after 3 to 5 years of consistent practicing is not particularly difficult to play. I mean, you get into very technical, specific genres. I mean, I'm talking mostly mainstream country, pop, rock, and even some metal acts. Really, after 3 to 5 years of consistent practicing and dedication, you can get to the playing ability where you can hit that. But there's a lot more to the group dynamics and the fame aspects of being a musician that are on the surface a lot harder to see. And I'm sure there's a lot of YouTube guys that have a lot of frustration. They're like, why is X person famous and why am I not famous? And I struggled with this, and I think a lot of people do that are capable musicians. It's like, what he's playing, I can do that. Why does my content, or why am I not getting the views? And I think a lot of it comes down to is you work really hard, you come up with original ideas, and you happen to get lucky. A lot of these guys, they say they were grinding. They put up a video and it just took off, and then their channel basically exploded. You know, going back to Jared Dines, that's kind of what happened with him, is he had put out videos, albums, toured bands for years. And then all of a sudden, while he's kind of doing the YouTube thing, he puts up a video, the 10 Styles of Metal. And he gets into some really funny territory with the vocals, and that's what ended up going viral, and it exploded overnight. I have other friends, you know, Stay Metal Ray is a recent one. So he, you know, great guitar player, great playing ability, and all these things. And what ends up happening is I became aware of him maybe a little earlier, but something happened to where the tone, not to revisit the controversy for Ray, but plugin came out from JST called Misha Mansour, and Ray puts out a video that is unfavorable towards the product. He kind of picks it apart. He says, look, the way this is set up, I can't get a good sound out of this easily. This is not working. Why? You know, there's all this hype, there's these great demos, I'm not getting anywhere close to that same sound. And to be honest, I echo a lot of his sentiments because I went through a very similar experience with the Jason Richardson plugin. I heard these amazing demos, I fired it up, and for the first 10-15 minutes, I was like, this sounds like not good. It's muddy, it's undefined, it sounds nothing like what I consider a good Jason Richardson sound. And it wasn't until much later, after kind of hearing and Taylor Larson's workflow explained and some of the processing and EQ moves that are necessary to get that sound, it was too difficult. So anyway, with Stay Metal, right, he puts out an unfavorable review. JST has his video removed. There's a subsequent controversy. It gets reversed. Joey Sturgis issues a formal apology on his own YouTube channel, and that's around the time I really kind of invested in that channel. One of my good friends, Rudy Ayoub, is kind of an up-and-coming YouTube star, I guess you could call it. He's still in his early stages right now. He's at about 30K, a little over subs. But he has some videos that are bordering on hundreds of thousands of views. And I was kind of away for a time and kind of clicked on some of his stuff, and all of a sudden I realized his accumulated channel views had exploded. And I looked, and there was a handful of videos that had some viral ability, and they kind of ran very well. I think one of the most famed meme guitar players is K-Mac, who is very famous for having a couple short 1-2 minute videos where he there's one doing the Beatles and one doing Green Day with a 8-string, I believe, and he goes into some like death metal and gent territory towards the end and makes it really funny, and that exploded his popularity and you know, hundreds of thousands of subscribers and millions of views and this kind of thing. So the problem is you really, there's not a formula for success other than hard work. I think that's my biggest takeaway and my biggest point in this whole ramble is that there is no formula for success other than hard work, dedication, learning how to market yourself, not just how to play well, not just how to get a good sound, but how to market yourself properly and in such a way that it appeals to a broader audience without necessarily being formulaic or just kind of recycling what everyone else is doing. This is the double react to a react video, right? You're reacting to a reaction video and then reacting to that reaction to a reaction video. I mean, this is very convoluted, and this is the kind of thing we're seeing on YouTube now, right? But more so, it's working hard on your craft, working hard on your style, and writing what you want to hear, not necessarily trying to appeal to a certain commercial audience or too closely emulating a sound that's popular now that probably won't be in 3 to 5 years by the time you build up enough steam to kind of get yourself out there. So the key is to just have your own sound, your own style, your own thing going on, and not buy into all the trends and the hype. And I think that's really the secret to success. And it may not shed a whole lot of light onto why there are so many great guitar players who go unknown, but I think some of those factors kind of come into play. And legitimately, sometimes out of the blue, a video will surface. Somebody's at a gig, they take a cell phone video of some guy tearing it up, and it goes viral. You never know. Those kinds of things happen in today's day and age. But I think you look at anyone who's achieved success, because that's really where we want to draw our inspiration and kind of make some of these calls about, is like, look at who has success and how they got there. And virtually all of them worked very hard. There's very few people who pick up a guitar and a couple years later they're, on the top 40, right? That's pretty much unheard of. Anyone who's in a place of popularity, prominence, and even viral success, they worked pretty hard to get where they are. And it wasn't necessarily, from what you would think. It's randomly striking success by putting themselves out there a lot of different ways, putting out a lot of different content, and being original. I think being original is probably the hardest part. There's a lot of people who can do one thing well. I worked very hard for years to achieve a certain gent sound. That was kind of the big hype at the moment. And I got some views and some recognition for attributing to that scene and that sound, and that's fine. But that really wasn't, in hindsight, that really isn't where I should have been putting my focus. I should have been working more on writing full songs, getting together with other musicians, collabs, and putting out more of a consistent product with proper marketing. Like, if I'm going to put out a song out there, having a official music video that's well filmed and well thought out, even if it's lo-fi, just having a complete art concept, rather than I would work 100 hours in a studio, put out a song with a slideshow because it was finally ready, and release that, or releasing partially produced demos and expecting them to take off, right? So I think I see a lot of my mistakes in the past, and I just am kind of reflecting on what what it was that are some of the reasons why someone may or may not get the popularity they actually deserve or they think they deserve. And I think there's a big distinction there, but in general, what I've outlined here is a lot of the reasons why there's fantastic, talented musicians who go unknown. And I think as a individual, as an artist, we have to all learn to accept that that can be the case. There may be people who are phenomenally successful or talented or accomplished artists in their own right that never achieve commercial success, certainly, and who may never make a living exclusively on music, even though they have all the talent in the world. I mean, realistically, there are a million different ways to do it now, but if you want to exclusively pay your bills only on the merits of your product and your artistry, you have to be willing to make a lot of sacrifices and get very lucky. And I don't think that's where a lot of us are. I think a lot of us live in the real world. You know, we have bills, we have rent, we have obligations elsewhere, and we really, we end up having to put a lot of our time and energy into things outside of music, and that's just the reality. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a lot that was kind of on my mind and on my heart today, and I hope it makes sense. So thank you.